Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of what we are calling Accomplices for Justice Weekly. Uh, 30 minutes of quick conversation between Pastor Hughes and myself about uh, topics that are burning issues. Some of them are going to be more recent than others. Some of them are going to be, right in the news now. For example, we were deciding whether or not to talk about Representative Al Green's censure today, but instead we're gonna focus on our question with regard to DEI, which is also really in the news. Um, I really want to thank everyone for supporting us. We are giving specific special Zoom access to our supporters, those of you who are material supporters of Accomplices for Justice. And if you want access to this and to be able to ask questions during this half an hour, let us make a donation. At opendoorjudaism.org or at our Patreon site, Accomplices for Justice on Patreon. So you can find us if you have questions on how to give, let me know. Uh, I'm Rabbi Jonathan Freirish, rabbi in Buffalo, working at Open Door Judaism, and with us is, as always, the good Reverend Dr. Wiley Hughes, who is senior pastor at Orchard Park Presbyterian. Wiley, you want to say anything to introduce yourself today?
I'm happy to be here. I'm happy we have great discussions, and I'm just happy that all of you decided to come along the journey with us. And we're just happy that you are with us.
So, right out of the news, we are going to start a new series of things that we're concerned about, or loves that are lost, or in this case, a incredibly important person who just died in the last 24 hours, and that's Roy Ayers, the vibraphonist who injected soul into jazz. Died
Mm,
at 84. He helped introduce a funkier strain of music in the 1970s, and he had a
yeah.
huge impact on hip hop with a tune called Everybody Loves the Sunshine, which has been sampled nearly 200 times. Uh, by the likes of Tupac Shakur, Dr. Dre, Mary J. Blige, and Snoop Dogg. So I'm a white guy. I am not uh, an aficionado of music the way Pastor Hughes is. So, Pastor Hughes, this is somebody who has meaning to you. Tell us a little bit about
Yes.
your sense of Roy Ayers.
I met Roy Ayers when I was in college. I'm a jazz musician. I'm a string bass player, upright bass player. I majored in jazz, and every year at my college, would host what was called Jazz Under the Stars. And basically would set up an auditorium on the green, and you could come and you could lay out your towel or your mat and have like a little picnic in the evening. And there were always like very famous artists who would come by and give a concert. And I mean, we're talking about Roberta Flack passed away a couple of days ago or last week. Roberta Flack performed at our school. Um, Jeffrey Osborne performed at our school, who was the member of LTD. Um, and so Roy Ayers was one of our first guest artists at Jazz Under the Stars. And we met him because I was a part of our college's jazz orchestra. And so when the jazz orchestra, we were the opening act for the artist. And so he came to our rehearsal, and I didn't realize that Roy Ayers was a consummate jazz musician because the only music of his that I heard was always either funk or R&B or this sort of lighter, soulful jazz kind of genre that I really didn't, because I was hardcore bebop. I was hardcore jazz at the time, and so I was like, yeah, Roy Ayers not really jazz. He's pop. But he came to our rehearsal and we had hours of conversation. And this man was a consummate musician. He was a pioneer in the sense that he was a post bebop artist that brought a lot of bebop into modern music. And so he was one of those pioneers of music. Sort of, he was overshadowed by Miles Davis and some other those fusion jazz artists that got mainstream. He was a bit overshadowed by them, but his vibraphone sound was one of the enduring sounds that crossed genres. And so it's no wonder that he was sampled so much because that sound that he created in the late 60s and 70s was sort of defined a genre even
Mm.
now. Um, and so it was a benefit for us as young musicians to actually talk to this man. He wasn't just his music. He was an individual. He was a person. He had an idea. He had an ethos. And once he explained that to us, we had a better appreciation for his music. So it was, I'm not going to say it was a life changing experience, but it was one experience that I will never forget. And so I am sad to hear that he's passed. I mean, he was pretty ancient. So, um,
Well, in his early 80s anyway.
yes,
And so for
yeah.
those of you who are wondering how we're going to connect Roy Ayers and this conversation about jazz to our topic today. Our topic today, loosely called The Death of DEI. Was it a mercy
Yes.
killing and what do we do now? Uh, I'm going to say I am not an uninitiated jazz person.
Mhm.
I was a saxophone player in high school and college. I was a jazz DJ at my jazz radio station, at my regular college radio station. I even got paid as a DJ and program director. And Roy Ayers is not top of mind for me. Now,
Right.
why the heck is that? And the reason is the reason for affirmative action and DEI,
Mm,
because
exactly.
it doesn't matter how I encounter jazz. It doesn't matter that everybody, almost everybody I listened to on a regular basis as a jazz musician was an African American. What matters is that the brokers of culture through
Mm,
which I heard jazz were white
mm.
people.
Yep.
And so the recognition, so think of this. This is a person whose music was so influential that he was sampled by nearly 200 different hip hop musicians.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not a listener to hip hop because
Mm-hmm.
I'm a white guy. You know, I am a product of the 70s and 80s, and had I been an African American in the same situation, I would have been a hip hop
Mm-hmm.
listener, and I was not. So
Mm-hmm.
this is why we have affirmative action, because affirmative action comes from this notion that we are not seeing fairness in American culture.
Right.
It's not some, newfangled 20 aughts or
No.
20 teens or 2020s idea.
It's just
1961,
yeah.
JFK starts affirmative action. Why does JFK start affirmative action in 1961? Because at Lockheed Martin and the places during the military industrial complex where a huge amount of American prosperity is being created, African Americans can only get hired in the janitorial staff.
Mm-hmm.
And in those companies that are building airplanes and building components for NASA and this in the moonshot and all that sort of stuff, nobody's coming in as a fully trained engineer. They are getting
Mm-hmm.
on the job training as riveters, as welders,
Mm-hmm.
as secretaries.
Right.
And African Americans have zero access. So
Right.
this is about hiring practices for federal contracts starting in 1961. This is not some, well, what what do we where are people coming up with this objection to DEI now? Is really our question, Pastor Hughes. Why are we um, offering a eulogy?
Well, because and I'll yeah, because the DEI initiatives have no soul. They have no soul. Um, and let me take it back to Roy Ayers for a minute. One of the things that Roy Ayers told us about his career, and this was back in the early 2000s, I think. So one would even say that his career had yet not yet ended. He was still doing his thing, but he was in relative obscurity until um, the hip hop community picked it up. So one of the things that he told us was that the reason why heard a, a lot of people are familiar with Miles Davis and his jazz fusion era with Bitches Brew and other albums and his crossover appeal, and why Roy Ayers didn't have a crossover appeal was because of the industry moguls who were in charge. The industry moguls who were in charge put every artist in a category. And these categories were completely racial. And so Roy Ayers came out of a category that was predominantly African American. It was the jazz category. And Miles Davis also came out of the jazz category, which was predominantly African American. Now, the African American category of jazz had a following. It was marketable, right? You could market an African American artist as a jazz artist, and that was the stream that you went in. Now, the difference between Miles Davis and Roy Ayers was Miles Davis went to Europe. And Miles Davis, because he couldn't get what he wanted in America because of the system, because of the
Mm,
industry, and because of racism, he went to Europe. And Europe embraced Miles Davis. They embraced his creativity and gave him a platform in Europe. A lot of people don't understand that that Bitches Brew was an album that was a recording of an actual concert that took place in Paris. And
wow.
he and a couple of musicians got together and they said, well, let's just do some crazy stuff on stage and let's see what works. And out of that concert, they put together some songs and it got very popular. And so there were people in America who were saying, well, gosh, we like that. Can we have some of that? And so Miles Davis came back home and said, well, yeah, sure, I'll put an album together for you. And he called all those musicians back. Now, Roy Ayers did not have the benefit of traveling to Europe. And so he was trying to break the barrier. He was trying to break out of the African American dominated jazz category and get into the crossover, but he had no crossover appeal because all of his fans were black. And the
Mm.
industry didn't think that it was marketable. They didn't think they was going to make any money. And so he had to do all of this on his own. And so all of his albums, he didn't really have a lot of albums because he had to produce the albums himself. And it wasn't until, you know, later on down the line, around the time that he came to perform at our school, was when he finally was able to get the capital and the industry finally sort of took notice and said, "Oh yeah, you're kind of crossover, aren't you? Aren't you?" You see what I'm saying?
No, totally. And this is a really fundamental phenomenon that we see throughout the last 100 years,
Hmm.
which is great African American artists go to Europe and come back with the recognition that they need. And
That's
it
right.
doesn't matter whether it's, Betty Carter
Right.
um, or Miles Davis or
Hmm.
John Coltrane, any, Charlie Parker, all
Hmm.
of them are getting transformed by being able to go to Europe and have a different experience there.
That's right. That's
And
right.
I would put forward that this is a problem with American cultural needs for, let's just call it, an acceptable vanilla flavor that you can get everywhere.
Mm.
Uh, Bookstores in Europe have better selections of American authors, even to this day, than bookstores and Amazon and publishers
Hmm.
here in the United States, because
Hmm.
Europeans are publishing, you know, Sylvia Plath and
Right.
other authors that we don't see here in collections that we don't see here
Right.
because we have, yeah, Josephine Baker. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect example.
Uh, so what we're seeing is the American, and it goes back to capitalism, right?
Mm.
The American need to sell something to everyone in the same place, so that you can get a relatively acceptable bad cup of coffee at Starbucks everywhere in the United States without having to actually go and find a local place that
Right.
roasts their own thing that gives you
Right.
something that's
Th-
unique and better.
That's right. That's exactly right. I saw an interview with an African American scholar, a female, and I cannot remember her name, and I cannot find her name, but she's made the statement. She said that capitalism has to have a scapegoat. Capitalism has to have a poor. Capitalism has to have a demographic of people who have not in order for it to work. So she said that racism is just a tool of capitalism in the sense that
Absolutely.
that capitalism can only thrive when there's something that keeps people oppressed. And racism is the tool of that oppression in many cases. And so you have to have, so there's got to be a way we can oppress somebody. Somebody's got to catch it, right? So who is it?
So this gets us to our question that we raised on DEI over a year ago,
Hmm.
because Pastor Corey Brooks wrote a controversial piece in like January of 2024, which unbelievably is a year ago, uh,
Tell me about it.
right, about American works, but DEI doesn't.
Mm,
And he talked about how DEI is not helping his African American community on the south side of Chicago.
hmm.
And that what's because and we are going to have a more extensive conversation about this when we look at We Were Never Woke, the
Hmm.
book by Musa Al-Gharbi, which is that where what's been the impact of DEI? The impact of DEI is really in the top quintile of American society.
Hmm.
And really, and we've talked about this, that the benefits have been mostly white women with certain advantages already, or
Hmm.
for that matter, multicultural people who were
Yes,
already going to good schools and getting good
that's
jobs
right.
anyway.
That's right.
Uh, so there's a whole spectrum of that maybe the downfall of DEI is in fact that it hasn't done what we hoped it would do. So it's an
That's
empty
what I was going to
target.
say. I was going to say that the principles, the idea, the initiative itself is in the right place, but its application just did not live up to what it had been expected, right? It looked good on paper, but it just in its application, it did not meet those needs simply because the people administering it are biased and they're racist. They will serve anybody as long as they don't have to serve African Americans. And so they're going to lump all of the so-called disadvantaged people, the oppressed people, into one lump, right? And as long as black people are down at the bottom of the pile, then it's okay because again, we talked about this. If you break down what DEI is and you say, well how do you feel about diversity? Everybody will say, yes, that's great, that's beautiful, let's do it. If you say equity, yes, I believe in it. Yes, that's all. We all should be equitable, be treated equitably. But when you get to inclusion, that's usually the snag. Whenever I ask people in my community, and this is the Orchard Park community in Buffalo, and I ask them about the inclusion part, that's where I get the snag because it's not because they understand what that means. That means inclusion means including everybody. And that's the one thing that most people have a problem with.
So is this the frightening part of Dr. King's vision of you know a a Thanksgiving table that is actually representative of the country, because it turns out that a lot of people don't want to sit next to people who are different than they are.
That's it. That's it.
And so it's easy for a lot of white people like me with advantages of a variety of ways to say, okay, I'm not that person.
Hmm.
I want to sit down with my Native American neighbor. I want to sit down with my African American neighbor. I want to sit down with Hispanic Americans and immigrant Americans. I want my table to be diverse. I'm happy to do that.
Hmm.
So here's here's where the rubber hits the road in my limited experience on this. And we this when inviting students to participate in bat and bar mitzvah celebrations. In the Jewish world, we're now even saying b mitzvah because people want to have a gender
Oh boy.
expansion in that. So here's a celebration for kids who are 13. They work hard together in religious school. They train together. There are, 5, 10, or 15 of them in the class. And the inclusion principle here is that in a lot of synagogues that I've worked, we have said everyone in your class must be invited to everyone else's celebration.
Hmm.
And if there is an economic reason why it can't happen, we will help.
Hmm.
This has often been met with incredible resistance because when we apply the values of inclusion, which are at the heart of a whole lot of Jewish teachings,
Hmm.
at the heart of a whole lot of American teachings about making sure everybody is
Christian
treated
too.
fairly.
Let's go.
Well, yeah, but we're in synagogues. We don't go the JC route
No,
there.
but I'm saying it's we can.
So so well-intentioned Jewish people with advantages balk at the idea of forcing one another to invite each other to
Hmm.
their parties because it's a party and it's supposed to be just the people you want
Mm,
without and we're not grappling with the implications of the one student who's left out all the time,
hmm.
who's never invited, and then when they invite everybody, nobody shows up.
Hmm.
So we
Yeah.
say everybody has to be invited and everybody has to make every effort possible to show up because that's a good social, societal, communal norm.
Right.
And people, as you said, they balk at inclusion.
Yep. They balk at inclusion, and that is a microcosm of our great nation. Is that we talk a good game about loving each other, we talk a good game about being welcoming to each other, but at the end of the day, we are not. If you don't look like us, you will not get that same welcome. And that's been the whole saga of America race relations. It's, you know, oh yeah, sure, okay, you were enslaved, but now you're free. So go over there. Why do you want to come over here? I mean, and let's just go back. We can go back before America. England was the same thing. Let's go around the world and subjugate all of these indigenous people and take all of their resources and bring it back to Europe and then get angry when those people from that area come to Europe as immigrants. Well, what do you expect? You've taken everything from their home and you've set it up in Europe. And so they're only coming because you have prospered so much off of what you've stolen.
Well, and Snyder actually talks about this in his other book, which is that
On tyranny.
uh, well, in On Tyranny, but particularly in the audio version, his audio update from 2022,
Oh, okay. Okay.
which is which is that and which focuses on lessons from Ukraine.
Mm,
And one of the things he said is that there have only been really two successful nation models in Europe. And one has been the current model of European integration,
mm-hmm.
where the EU has created nations that are interdependent and
Mm-hmm.
connected, and that is successful. And the other model that has been marginally successful at all is empire.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
and that the nation state model has been a failure.
Right.
And because all of those ethnic nation states, like the post-Soviet uh,
Yeah.
Baltic and Balkan
Baltic,
states,
the Slavic states. Yeah.
were failures.
Yep.
They only have been successful once they get integrated into the European system.
Yep.
And and if we are going to abandon empire here in this country because we are still working off an empire system,
Well, we are an empire.
we are an empire. We are not integrated, and
Right.
we are in the throes of attempting to support empire. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, was an attempt to undo our need for empire. That affirmative action,
That.
right, as framed by
Yeah.
by Kennedy in 1961, failure as it is, was an attempt at civil rights, as we've talked about, attempt to undo the empirical nature, the empire nature of the United States, to say that we are going to, in fact, be an integrated,
Yeah.
citizenship-based civic society, not based on exploitation and empire.
I I don't. I disagree. I disagree. No, but well, let me first say I hear exactly what you're saying, and I think that is I think what that is what that the government has projected for us to consume. I think that is the exact image that they want us to accept, is that these measures that the government took were were an attempt to address a shortcoming and a failure in the system so that we can adjust and we can fix it so that we do not lean toward tyranny as we see with those people over there. However, in 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 practice, I don't think that's what they were doing. I think, or I feel, I should say, that in practice it was a tool of pacification. because if because they realize that if they continue to do what they were doing to the oppressed people in this country, that the proletariat uprising would take place, and there was
So
so much more proletariats than there
so
were elites.
you and I are just playing King and Malcolm X right now,
Yeah, yes, we are. Yes, we
right?
are.
That um your Malcolm X perspective on this is there is no making peace with the oppressor.
Right.
And so let's look at maybe as our concluding thought because only Chris is here and Chris has participated. Chris, do you have any questions going forward, or can I offer this next conversation point? I'll have to ask her if to unmute if she wants.
So I just have one comment, or
Please.
two comments actually. And the first is that I have found, and white privilege I think goes into this, that when I go into spaces that are traditionally Black spaces, I feel welcomed and included. And the other comment is that for 30 some years, there's been a jazz festival in Martin Luther King Park for 2 weekends in
Mm-hmm.
August.
Yep.
And my husband loves jazz, has been listening, had used to listen to the jazz station, the public radio jazz station when it was still a jazz station, again, for about 30 years. And he does not recall that they ever mentioned on that station the jazz festival in Martin Luther King Park,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
because he's sure that if they had mentioned it and he heard free and jazz in a park, we would have been there, as soon as he heard about it.
Right.
So, so the so part of the problem with a lack of diversity in public radio, in businesses, in congregations, in other spaces, is that everybody misses out on things.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been going the last 2 summers we've gone because we heard about it 2 years ago and enjoyed it immensely, but it's not something that we heard about before that.
And this is absolutely, Chris. Thank you for that because that's really such a beautiful observation that crystallizes the degree to which everybody loses out, right? It's the Heather McGhee, some of us. Uh, Racism is getting in the way of everything for all of us. Um, One of the things that Pastor Brooks, who started us in this conversation a while ago, points out is that DEI and affirmative action often don't take the form of empowerment, of in fact helping people succeed in the way that they want to. Giving people the tools for success. Instead, they focus on sort of a top-down hiring practice idea, which, as we've shown, hasn't really helped, right? What's the assistance that might have helped Chris, you and your husband find a jazz festival here when and part of it is all of us being more adventurous, and you are more adventurous than most, and still would are we going to jazz performances on the other side of town is one of the big deals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in Manhattan, jazz is relatively integrated into Manhattan culture, because you go to Blue Note and it's the place to go.
Right.
But
Yep.
the Colored Musicians Club is the place to go here in town, and most of the people in town who are white don't go there.
Right.
Uh,
Because
so
of the name.
because of the name. So we have sort of but we have, fans of jazz like Chris and me still listening to the NPR jazz
Right.
station. And the NPR jazz station is uh, not doing a good job of affirmative action in
No,
its access.
you're right. And I remember talking with another jazz friend of mine from college, and he said he went to a jazz festival I think he was in Philadelphia. He's a drummer, and he has a band. Anyway, so he was in this jazz festival in Philadelphia, and the theme of the festival was honoring the greats. And he said 3 hours of this festival, and there was not a single African American artist, composer, or performer on the stage. 3 hours.
How is that possible?
How? That's what he kept asking. He said, "How is this possible? How can we honor the greats of jazz and not a single African American and not okay?" And we're talking about bands that were covering music. Like we're talking about, they were like maybe six bands that were just doing classical jazz music, and none of the music that they were playing was by African Americans.
How? I mean, the white American songbook, jazz
Yeah,
songbook is pretty effing thin.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
And that's what
that takes effort.
that's what he said. He said it took someone did this deliberately. This was not a mistake. This was not an accident.
I
This
mean,
was an
I didn't happen
intentional.
onto a Dizzy Gillespie piece. I didn't happen onto a Charlie Parker piece. I didn't happen onto a Louis Armstrong piece. I mean, WTF?
Yeah, yeah. And he's telling all, he's sending this mass email. He's like, guys, I can't believe this.
How can you play jazz and not play something by the Duke?
I don't know. And he and there were some people there at the festival who were like, well, wow. I mean, okay, these are great. I mean, and and the thing was they were in a chronological order. So it would have been different if they were just picking random. But this was chronological. Instead of them talking about Duke Ellington or Count Basie, they talked about Benny Goodman. Instead of them talking about Miles Davis and the cool jazz era, they talked about Stan Getz. And we're talking about they went on from
But
bebop.
but
They
you
went.
can't talk about Stan Getz without talking about John Coltrane.
Well, that's what we were saying. And so it was just one of those things. And then finally, of course, the main event was it was actually it was Stanley Turrentine, I think, was the main event. I can't remember who it was. I wasn't there, but 3 hours, three
So
hours.
so this is where we are.
This is where we
And
are.
this is where we are. And now we are in the middle of the backlash of all backlashes.
Exactly. That's what
So
this is.
so our message, maybe for now, is let's talk about empowerment as opposed to affirmative action. Let's
Mm.
talk about advancement as opposed to privileges. Let's figure out how to get everybody to get advantages. Uh, yeah, Pastor Hughes.
This does bring to light something that Dr. King even said, and I think Malcolm X agrees. But Dr. King said this. He said it is very difficult to shame a person without shame. It's very difficult to argue a moral standard to a person without morals. And so the context of that statement had to do with the Civil Rights Act of 1964,
Right.
and people were trying to laud him in his efforts. You know what? Without you, Dr. King, we would have never been able to pass this piece of legislation. It is a landmark legislation. It's going to change the political and social landscape of America for generations to come. And Dr. King said, "This is a band-aid." He said, "What we have done is that we have placed a band-aid over the problem because the problem will still persist. This just makes it illegal. But we
Right.
understand
And as we have seen, and as you continue to point out, laws are just words
laws are just words."
unless we actually take care to follow the law.
Exactly.
So with that, you and I have come up with a large spectrum of topics. We are going to continue to try to do this Accomplices for Justice weekly in the vein of burning topics.
Mm,
So uh, continuing free speech issues. We have never been woke issues. I have a conversation today with a Saudi American, and I think we may bring him on as a guest to talk about Israel, Palestine, and American Jews, Americans, immigrants, Arab Americans, and liberalism. Whence liberalism might still come up again, but
yep.
at this point, whence the rule of law is likely to come up as well. So if you have a topic that you want us to talk about, let us know. If you want to come in and join the last 5 minutes of discussion like Chris did today, become a material supporter of Accomplices for Justice and Open Door Judaism by tagging us on Patreon or looking at the website opendoorjudaism.org. We are so appreciative of all of you who are here and capable of supporting us. Do not miss out on our regularly scheduled, open to everyone in person and on Zoom Accomplices for Justice Finding Freedom Together next Tuesday evening at 5:30.
Yes.
We will be looking at chapter 3 of Timothy Snyder's book on freedom mobility.
Mm.
There will be resources for us to look at. Hopefully, I will get them out to everybody by Sunday.
And
And
snacks.
snacks, and there will be snacks. So show up live at the Buffalo History Museum. We are grateful to our supporters here. We are grateful to the Buffalo History Museum and to
Yes.
Humanities New York, who has supported us with a grant. Thank you, everybody. This will be
Thank you.
on
Thank you. Thank you.
YouTube and on podcast and your regular places, specifically on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and everybody have a good week and hold it together in these challenging times. Be decent
Yes.
in the microcosm. Our
Mm.
decency is important, and be bold in the macrocosm.
Mm.
Call things out and step into gaps and show up for fairness because the world is teetering on this idea that unfairness is okay.
Mm. Amen.
Thank you, everybody. Have a
Thank you, Chris.
wonderful rest of the week. Thank you so much, Chris. And we say to everyone, have a good day. All right.